Aloha. We're going to do another one of these page one critiques. I am still avoiding writing to some degree. I gave up on the Jacob's Ladder reboot, and I've started a work in progress based on the film Silent Running. Well, it's not based on it, it's inspired by it. And this I felt was a brilliant film, but I have to admit I last watched it an awfully long time ago. It kind of broke my heart when I was about 8 or 10 or maybe 21, a long time ago when I was young. Um, I'm not sure everyone else agrees with me because the average here is 6.6 off not very many votes, and it was made in 1972, which was 5 years before Star Wars. So it's actually pretty good stuff. Anyway, these little robot guys in it are called, well, this guy names them Huey, Dewey, and Louie after the nephews of, I want to say Daffy Duck, but it's not, is it? Is it Donald Duck's nephews? Yeah, I think it's Donald Duck's nephews. So this causes me to do Google searches on things like what were their proper names, and it turns out to be Hubert, Deuteronomy, and Lewis, or is that also pronounced Louis? I'm not sure. And apparently in the reboot it was changed to Dewford and Llewellyn, but I'm sticking with Deuteronomy and Lewis. But anyway, that's the sort of rabbit holes I go down, and I'm having some fun with the writing here. So I'm not avoiding it too hard, but I am going to avoid it a little bit by making this video, which is going to be a page one critique on The Girl with All the Gifts, which is an excellent book. I interleave the books I consider to be excellent with the page ones that were sent in to me, which I'm not saying aren't excellent. I'm just saying they're more random. Whereas when I go to one of these, I'm sort of to a degree guaranteed to like the page one. I mean, it may not be a great page one, but it's certainly not going to be a terrible one. And in the ones we've looked at so far, they've all turned out to be really good page ones. Read this a few years ago. There's a follow-up, The Boy on the Bridge, I've not read yet. There's a film, really good film. And yeah, I recommend it to you all. I won't say much about it because it's the book that there's a twist in it fairly early on, and if that twist is spoiled for you, yeah, it doesn't destroy the book, but it's nicer not to have it revealed. So I'll scroll past all of these disclaimers and plow on into the book itself, which, as usual, I'm going to do my fairly poor attempt at reading it out loud and then revisit it with some notes. Her name is Melanie. It means the black girl from an ancient Greek word, but her skin is actually very fair, so she thinks that maybe it's not such a good name for her. She likes the name Pandora a whole lot, but you don't get to choose. Miss Justineau assigns names from a big list. New children get the top name on the boys' list or the top name on the girls' list, and that, Miss Justineau says, is that. There haven't been any new children for a long time now. Melanie doesn't know why that is. There used to be lots, every week or couple of weeks, voices in the night, muttered orders, complaints, the occasional curse, a cell door slamming. Then, after a while, usually a month or two, a new face in the classroom, a new boy or girl who hadn't even learned to talk yet, but they got it fast. Melanie was new herself once, but that's hard to remember because it was a long time ago. It was before there were any words. There were just things without names, and things without names don't stay in your mind. They fall out and then they're gone. Now she's 10 years old, and she has skin like a princess in a fairy tale, skin as white as snow. So she knows that when she grows up, she'll be beautiful, with princes falling all over themselves to climb her tower and rescue her, assuming, of course, that she has a tower. In the meantime, she has a cell, the corridor, the classroom, and the shower room. The cell is small and square. It has a bed, a chair, and a table. On the walls, which are painted grey, there are pictures. A big one of the Amazon rainforest, and a smaller one of a pussycat drinking from a saucer of milk. Sometimes Sargent and his people move the children around, so Melanie knows that some of the cells have different pictures in them. She used to have a horse in a meadow, and a mountain with snow on top, which she liked better. So there we have it. Let's pitch in. So we start with her name is Melanie, which means the black girl. Just as a side note, actually, in the movie, Melanie is played by a black actress very well. And I know we're having a lot of sort of hoo-ha on the internet these days about casting people in different races and genders, but I didn't see anyone lift the slightest eyebrow over this casting choice, and there was no reason why they should do. But back to the actual line in hand. It's not actually, to my mind, a particularly brilliant opening line, but as I said before, a wonderful book doesn't necessarily have to have the world's best first page, and you can have the world's best first page and then go downhill rapidly after that. But just as a first line, the discussion of her name and the fact that it doesn't fit with her skin color, I don't know. The next bit is actually more interesting, a lot more interesting. We talk about Pandora, which carries a sort of degree of baggage with it. Is she some sort of box of all ills, and if you open her up, will every bad thing in the world come out with hope at the bottom? Is that prophetic, or is it just a random observation? Given it's so early in the book, maybe there's some sort of something implied by it. And then this whole business of you arrive here and the teacher, or Miss Justineau, gives you a name. That's pretty unusual. So immediately it's got us asking questions and setting a sort of tone, and that's very good. So that might have been where I started. And there's this idea that something as important as a name is just mechanically handed out from a list. And then we move on to talk about there haven't been any new children for a long time now, and there's talk of voices in the night and the cell door slamming. All of that's more interesting too. It's prompting us to ask more questions, and it carries this sort of faintly ominous air of threat with it. Why is the supply of new children drying up? It could be something malign. And cell doors. How do cell doors and children go together? So that's all making me speculate, making me want to read on for answers, and that's great. And then this next line again, the slight strangeness is mounding up, and the questions are mounding up. Why would a child who's coming to school or wherever this place is not know how to talk? That's very strange. They grab some sort of feral child from a jungle. Are they, in quotes, re-educating some indigenous population? What's going on? More questions, all good. And there's a sort of side discussion here. I have a Discord that goes with my Patreon, and there's loads of discussions going on there all the time. But and we sort of talk about writing. And when I'm writing some new stuff, I sometimes put my page one there and see what people think about it. And it prompted this observation that many people don't actually really draw a distinction between being confused and having questions. And those are, in fact, overlapping states of mind. But in terms of talking about writing, I like to draw a distinction between them. One being good and one being bad. That having questions is good and being confused is bad. As a writer, you don't want to confuse your readers, but having them have questions that they want answered is not the same as confusing them, and having them have questions that they want answered is good. And I think in part the success or failure of a first page, or indeed a whole chapter or book, is dependent upon which of these two camps your work falls into. So you can have something that has an inherent strong contradiction, and that can be read as bad writing, as a mistake, and it can lead the reader to be naturally confused and confused with good reason. For example, what I've written down here, I've said, John and Mary kept running down the twisted subterranean tunnel. Slow down, Mary called. The blazing sunshine was overheating her, and the distant mountains seemed no closer. Now, to my mind, that's confusion. There's an obvious contradiction there, and unless it's addressed immediately, it's just going to confuse you. Are they in a tunnel or are they outside? It's saying clearly that they're in a tunnel, and yet in the very next line, it's talking about sunshine and distant mountains. That's a poorly put together piece of writing, and it causes confusion. Now, yes, you could. It's just semantics. You could say, "Oh, what it's doing is making me ask questions about where they are," but actually, those contradictions are so sizable that I would say it's confusion rather than asking questions. Whereas, if you were to write, and these are just thrown down, John and Mary kept running down the twisted subterranean tunnel. Faster, Mary called. The grobbler was catching up. Then we're not confused. We have a question. Why are they running? What's a grobbler? But it's not failing to make any kind of sense. We just have a question that can reasonably be answered. And I would think that would prompt you to ask questions, and you might want to read on to find out why they're running from a grobbler. Whereas the other one is so contradictory that you're just saying, what's going on? So aim for them asking questions, don't aim to confuse them. And in this page 1, I'm clearly in the camp of having questions, but I'm not in any way confused. I can follow what's been written. I'm totally in the belief that it's going to make sense, and I just need a few answers to make sense of it, and that's great. So now we talk about Melanie and her experience. So she was at one point when she arrived, she didn't have wasn't able to speak. She didn't have a language, and then naturally, like when we're very young children, before we learn to speak, we don't remember a lot of those things because we didn't have the language to encode those things into memory. So that's all good. It's a valid observation, and it's specific to the character. It's telling us more about the character, and it's telling us interesting things about the character because she is one of these interesting children who's arrived here not being able to speak. We're back talking about her skin color here, but at least now it's in a more interesting way. It's making that echo of the fairy tale Snow White, with her skin as white as snow. That's the line certainly in the Lady Bird book that I had when I was a kid, probably in the Disney cartoons from the 40s as well. And so it carries those echoes, and it shows us something about her experience at this school. She came here not talking, but she knows about fairy tales and things, so she's being educated and told stories and these sorts of things, and it sort of creates a sense of empathy with us, because here is a little girl and she's talking about princesses and princes and towers and her future, and yet she's in some sort of cell and she's been given her name, and there's we're seeing her sort of innocent and childish ambitions against a fairly bleak utilitarian backdrop with some ominous things maybe happening, and that's a great dichotomy, a great contradiction. And we see that when she goes on to say, assuming of course that she has a tower, it's saying, well, actually, even at 10 and raised as she has been raised, she appears to be pretty intelligent. She's not wholly naive. She is questioning some of this narrative. And then in one line, we are shown quite how small her world is. That's very efficient, effective world building. And we're pretty clear that she's in some form of prison, even though she is not seeing it as a prison, which again is a nice juxtaposition of points of view. We see the world through her words, but in a very different way to the way she's seeing it. And she's describing the cell and these posters like windows into different possibilities for her, which is all quite touching. That her world is so bleak and grey that she's investing so much imagination and attention to these small things that should be parts of every childhood: color and imagination. So to conclude, that first line made me stumble just a tiny bit, but then it gets directly into its stride and does an excellent job, and I'm completely invested. I definitely want to turn page 2 and find out what the hell's going on, but I'm not confused. I have questions, and that's exactly where the author should want me to be, and it's where I am. I think this is a very well done page 1, and I'm going to end my discussion of it here by my traditional hunt for the button that stops all of this.